Hey everyone. If you're looking for a story that makes you question how much of our past truly defines us, and whether true love can conquer old wounds, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and let us know in the comments below where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always exciting to see who's joining us from around the world. The unexpected guardian. I don't want to! I don't want to go! Lily's heartbreaking scream pierced the damp air of Greenwich Park like an arrow. The 5-year-old girl had thrown herself onto the ground, hugging her knees, trembling under the rain that began to fall harder. Passers-by hurried past, avoiding the uncomfortable scene. "Miss, is everything all right?" A soft voice cut through the chaos. Lily looked up. A young woman, around 24, had knelt in front of her, not caring that her jeans were soaking against the wet pavement. She had brown hair tied in a messy ponytail and green eyes that shone with genuine tenderness. "My name is Emily," she whispered, extending her hand. "Do you know what I like to do when it rains like this?" Lily looked at her without responding, but she stopped crying. "I imagine the raindrops are little messages from the sky. Do you want to wait together and see what they tell us?" Without further explanation, Emily sat on the damp ground and opened her arms. Lily, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, snuggled against her chest. The embrace was instinctive, desperate, as if the child had been waiting for that moment for months. 30 yards away, behind the fogged glass of a black Bentley, Daniel Blackwood observed the scene through his phone's security cameras. His gray eyes, usually cold as steel, narrowed with a mixture of surprise and something he couldn't quite name. "Mr. Blackwood, should I go get the child?" asked Robert, his driver and head of security. "Wait," Daniel continued to watch. His daughter, who hadn't uttered a complete word in the last 8 months, seemed calm, almost happy. Lily's shoulders, always tense, had completely relaxed against this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere. Who was this woman? Emily gently rocked Lily as the rain intensified. She didn't seem in a hurry to find shelter. Her cheap clothes, a cotton jacket that had seen better days, clung to her body, but she acted as if she were in the most comfortable place in the world. "Where are your parents, little one?" Emily murmured against Lily's blonde hair. The girl pointed towards the car with a trembling finger. Daniel sighed and got out of the vehicle. As he walked towards her, he studied the young woman. She was petite, probably not even 5'3", but there was something in her presence that filled the space. When she looked up at him, Daniel felt an unexpected jolt in his stomach. She was beautiful. Not in the artificial, calculated way of the women in his social circle, but with a naturalness that completely disarmed him. "Excuse me," Daniel said, his voice hoarser than usual. "She's my daughter." Emily slowly stood up, not letting go of Lily, who clung to her neck as if she were a lifeline. "Of course," Emily smiled, though Daniel noticed a flicker of nervousness in her eyes. She was very scared. "Is she all right? Lily has episodes ever since her mother died." The words came out drier than Daniel intended. Emily didn't ask uncomfortable questions, nor did she put on that pitying expression he so detested. She simply nodded and began to murmur something into Sarah's ear. To Daniel's surprise, his daughter laughed. A small, almost imperceptible laugh, but real. "What did you tell her?" he asked, genuinely curious. "That raindrops are the happy tears of the clouds when they see daddies find their children." Daniel blinked. It was the most absurd thing he had heard in years, but Lily was still smiling. "You have experience with children." The question came out before he could process it. Emily looked at him with surprise. "Some? I work at a daycare on weekends and—" "Are you looking for a job?" Daniel felt ridiculous interrupting her, but something in his instinct screamed at him not to let this woman get away. "As a nanny for Lily?" I don't have formal references, Mr. Blackwood. Daniel Blackwood. Emily paled slightly. Of course she recognized the name. The youngest CEO in London. A billionaire. The newspapers wouldn't stop talking about him and his little daughter, who had stopped speaking after her mother's death in a car accident. References don't matter, Daniel continued, surprising himself. Lily doesn't react like this with anyone, not even with me lately. The silence stretched between them, interrupted only by the patter of the rain. Emily looked at Lily, who had buried her face in the crook of her neck and seemed completely at peace. Can I think about it? I'll pay you triple what you earn now, house included. You start tomorrow. Daniel's directness disarmed her. No. She was used to being spoken to like this, with that mix of authority and desperation. Mr. Blackwood, you don't know me. I could be anyone. Daniel studied her. Her cheap but clean clothes, her unmanicured but well-kept hands, the way she held Lily as if she were the most precious thing in the world. His business instinct screamed caution, but something deeper, something that had been dormant for 8 months, whispered to him. To trust. You're right, I don't know you, but my daughter does. As if she had been waiting for that signal, Lily lifted her head and looked directly at Emily. Are you staying? She murmured, so softly that Daniel barely heard her. They were the first words Lily had uttered since her mother's funeral. Emily felt her breath catch. She looked into Lily's eyes, then at Daniel, whose expression had completely changed. He was no longer the cold, calculating executive. He was simply a desperate father who had just heard his daughter's voice for the first time in months. I'm staying, Emily whispered. And for the first time in a long time, she felt exactly where she was supposed to be. The rain continued to fall, but none of the three seemed in a hurry to find shelter. At that moment, under the gray sky of London, a broken family unknowingly began to heal, and a young woman with buried secrets in her past became the missing piece in a puzzle she didn't know she was solving. Daniel watched Emily gently caress Lily's hair, and something stirred in his chest, something dangerous, something that scared him more than any board meeting or business decision. When they finally headed to the car, Lily refused to let go of Emily's hand, and Daniel, not quite knowing why, felt jealous of his daughter's intertwined fingers with those of this stranger who had just changed their lives forever. What do you think is the real reason Emily feels so connected to Lily and Daniel? Will her presence heal their old wounds or create new ones? Share your predictions in the comments. A reluctant connection, the Blackwood Manor in Greenwich looked like a museum. White marble everywhere, soaring ceilings, and a silence you could cut with a knife. Emily walked through the main hall, feeling her sneakers completely out of place with the cold elegance of the house. Your room is on the 2nd floor, to the east, Daniel informed her while checking his phone. Sarah eats breakfast at 8, lunch at 1, and dinner at 7. Strict schedules, and on weekends. Daniel looked up as if the question puzzled him. The schedules don't change. Routine is important for her. Emily nodded, but couldn't help but notice the rigidity in Daniel's voice. Everything in that house screamed order, control, coldness. It wasn't a home. It was a gilded cage. Where is Sarah now? In her room. Probably drawing. It's the only thing she does. Emily followed Daniel up the marble stairs, observing the family portraits hanging on the walls. She stopped in front of one in particular, a younger Daniel genuinely smiling, with a blonde woman with blue eyes and baby Sarah in his arms. That was Clara, Daniel murmured, noticing her pause. She was beautiful. He was right. The pain in his voice was palpable. Emily felt a strange pang in her chest. Not pity exactly, but something more complicated. Upon reaching the 2nd floor, Daniel stopped in front of a white door decorated with butterfly stickers. Sarah, he knocked softly. Your new caregiver is here. Silence. Emily approached and knelt by the door. "Hello, little one," she spoke softly. "Remember what we said about the messages from the rain? I think today the sky wants to tell us something new." The door slowly opened. Sarah peeked out, her blue eyes shining with curiosity. "What does it say?" she whispered. Emily smiled and looked out the hallway window. The sun was beginning to peek through the clouds. "It says it's time to make chocolate chip cookies." For the first time since she arrived, Daniel saw his daughter truly smile. 2 hours later, the immaculate Blackwood kitchen looked like a war zone. Flour everywhere, melted chocolate on the counter, and 2 figures covered in ingredients laughing like crazy. "Emily, it's burnt!" Sarah jumped excitedly, pointing at the oven. "A little golden, not burnt." Emily opened the oven and took out a tray of imperfect cookies that smelled heavenly. The best cookies have their own personality. Sarah took one and bit into it. Her eyes lit up. "They're delicious. Can Daddy try?" Emily felt a strange warmth in her chest. It was the first time Sarah had mentioned her father voluntarily. "Of course. Why don't we go find him?" They found Daniel in his study, in front of 3 monitors and a mountain of documents. He was wearing a white shirt that clung slightly to his torso, sleeves rolled up, showing muscular forearms. Emily swallowed and looked away. "Daddy!" Sarah ran in with a cookie in each hand. "We made cookies!" Daniel looked up, surprised. His daughter hadn't entered his study in months. "Really?" He dropped everything he was doing and approached Sarah. "Let's see." He bit the cookie his daughter offered him. It was too sweet and a little burnt, but it was the most delicious thing he had tasted in a long time. "It's perfect, Princess." Sarah threw herself into his arms, staining his impeccable shirt with chocolate. Daniel didn't complain. He just hugged her back, burying his face in his daughter's golden hair. Emily watched them from the doorway, feeling intrusive in that intimate moment. But when Daniel looked up and met her gaze over Sarah's head, something passed between them. A spark, a silent acknowledgement. "Thank you," Daniel articulated soundlessly. Emily's heart raced. That night, after putting Sarah to bed with 3 stories and 2 lullabies, Emily went down to the kitchen for a glass of water. The house was steeped in a sepulchral silence, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock. It had been an exhausting but wonderful day. Sarah had spoken more in those few hours than probably in months. They had played, laughed, even danced in the garden while watering the flowers. Emily filled her glass and headed back to her room, but stopped when she heard the sound of running water. The main bathroom door was ajar, and a faint light filtered through the crack. She should keep walking. It was the most sensible thing to do, but then she heard a muffled groan. Without thinking, she pushed the door open. Daniel was standing in front of the sink, shirtless, with a damp towel pressed against his left shoulder. He had an ugly, reddish wound that looked infected. "My God, what happened to you?" Daniel turned abruptly, surprised. His eyes met Emily's through the mirror. For a moment, neither of them moved. Emily couldn't help but notice Daniel's bare torso, defined muscles, an old scar on his ribs, drops of water sliding down his tanned skin. "It's nothing." Daniel tried to cover the wound with the towel. "I just scratched myself." "That's not a scratch. It's infected." Emily approached without asking permission and reached out to the wound. Daniel instinctively recoiled. "Don't touch me!" The command came out more aggressively than he intended. Emily stopped, but didn't move away. "When was the last time you went to the doctor?" "I don't have time for doctors." "David, this is serious. You could get sepsis." The use of his first name surprised them both. Until now, Emily had always been formal. "Let me help you," her voice insisted, softer. "Please." Daniel looked at her through the mirror. There was something in her green eyes that disarmed him. Genuine concern. Not the calculated concern of his partners or the uncomfortable pity of his acquaintances. It was something real, something he hadn't seen in a long time. "Okay," he murmured, lowering the towel. Emily approached slowly. Daniel could smell her cheap shampoo, a mix of flowers and something sweet that was driving him crazy. When her fingers brushed his skin to examine the wound, Daniel had to clench his fists to keep from reacting. "How did you do this?" "Gym accident. A functioning machine." "When?" "4 days ago." "David, this needs antibiotics and probably stitches." Her fingers moved gently around the wound, carefully cleaning the dried blood. Daniel closed his eyes, concentrating on breathing normally. "Do you have any antiseptic here?" Daniel pointed to the medicine cabinet with his head. Emily opened it and found what she needed. When she returned, Daniel had turned completely towards her. They were too close. Emily could see the small scars on his chest, the dark hair disappearing under the towel wrapped around his hips. Daniel could count the freckles on Emily's nose, notice how her cheeks had flushed. "This is going to hurt," Emily whispered, soaking a gauze with antiseptic. "I can take it." When the gauze touched the wound, Daniel didn't flinch. But when Emily's knuckles accidentally brushed his chest, his breath hitched. "I'm sorry," she murmured, but she didn't move away. "It's okay." Their voices were barely whispers. The bathroom felt intimate, charged with a tension neither of them knew how to handle. Emily finished cleaning the wound and began to apply a bandage. Her fingers worked carefully, but Daniel could feel the tremor in her hands. "Are you nervous?" The question came out before he could stop it. Emily looked up and met David's gray eyes, which were studying her intensely. "A little," she admitted. "Why?" Emily didn't know what to answer. Because she was inches away from her semi-naked boss. Because her hands trembled every time she touched him. Because there was something in the way he looked at her that made her feel exposed and desired at the same time. "I don't know," she finally murmured. Daniel slowly raised a hand and brushed Emily's cheek with the back of his fingers. She closed her eyes involuntarily. "Emily!" The sound of her name on David's lips was like a caress. Emily opened her eyes and found herself lost in his gaze. They were getting closer. Daniel's lips lightly brushed hers when, "Daddy, I had a nightmare!" Sarah's voice echoed through the house. Daniel and Emily sharply separated, as if they had received an electric shock. "I'm coming, princess!" Daniel shouted without taking his eyes off Emily. Emily backed away, her heart pounding so hard she was sure Daniel could hear it. I should go," she murmured, heading towards the door. "Emily." She stopped, but didn't turn around. "Thank you for this." Emily nodded without looking at him and left the bathroom, closing the door softly behind her. As she walked to her room, she could hear Daniel comforting Sarah in the next room. His voice was soft, paternal, full of love. Emily leaned against her bedroom door. Putting a hand to her chest, she could still feel the warmth of David's skin under her fingers, the smell of his aftershave, the way he had whispered her name. This was dangerous, very dangerous. But as she changed for bed, she couldn't get the image of Daniel looking at her, as if she were the only woman in the world, out of her head. In his room, Daniel put Sarah back to bed, stroking her hair until she fell asleep. But his mind was elsewhere, on green eyes that had looked at him without judgment, on hands that had touched him with tenderness, on a woman who in less than 24 hours had managed to make his daughter speak again and make him feel alive again. And that terrified him more than any board meeting or business decision he had faced in his life. "Hey, my dear, what do you think is the biggest secret Emily is hiding? How will this new emotional connection between her and Daniel be tested? Share your insights in the comments below. If this story of an unexpected love blooming from the ashes of grief is touching your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for the next heartwarming chapter. A Sister's Secret. Emily woke with the feeling that someone was watching her. She opened her eyes slowly and found Sarah sitting on the edge of the bed, playing with something between her fingers. "Good morning, little one," Emily murmured, sitting up. "What do you have there?" Sarah extended her hand. In her palm rested a delicate silver bracelet with a heart charm. Emily felt the air leave her lungs. "Where did you find it?" "In my secret drawer. Mommy told me it was special." Emily took the bracelet with trembling hands. It was identical to the one she had lost years ago at the St. Stephen's orphanage, the same one Sister Agnes had given her when she turned 15, the same one that had disappeared the day they took. "Emily." Sarah looked at her, worried. "Are you okay?" "Yes, honey. Just, did your mom ever tell you about this bracelet?" Sarah shook her head. "Only that it belonged to someone very special, someone Mom loved very much." Emily's heart was pounding so hard, she was sure Sarah could hear it. It was possible that, "Let's go have breakfast," she managed to say, putting the bracelet in her pocket. "Your daddy must be waiting for you." Daniel was waiting for them in the dining room, impeccably dressed in a navy blue suit. When Emily entered, their eyes met for an instant, before he ostentatiously focused on his newspaper. "Good morning, Daddy." Sarah ran to hug him. "Good morning, Princess. Did you sleep well?" "Yes, I dreamed of butterflies." Daniel smiled, but Emily noticed the tension in his shoulders. He had also had a bad night. "I have to go to Boston today," Daniel announced. "I'll be back tomorrow night." "Why? Can't we come with you?" Sarah pouted. "Did what?" "It's work, little one. But Emily will stay with you." Their eyes met again. This time Daniel didn't look away. "Of course," Emily murmured. "We'll be fine." After breakfast, Daniel said goodbye to Sarah with a kiss on her forehead. When he approached Emily, his cologne enveloped her like a caress. "My sister Beatrice will come this afternoon. She's known Sarah since she was born." "Your sister?" "Well, she's Clara's sister, but I've always considered her family. She takes care of Sarah when I'm not here." Something in his tone gave Emily a bad feeling, but she nodded. "Perfect." Daniel hesitated for a moment, as if he wanted to say something more, but finally just said, "Take care." Beatrice arrived at 3 in the afternoon like a hurricane. She was blonde, elegant, with the kind of cold beauty bought at the best clinics in Beverly Hills. Her blue eyes, so similar to Sarah's, evaluated Emily from head to toe in a matter of seconds. "You must be the new nanny." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Beatrice Thorne, Daniel's sister-in-law. Emily, pleased to meet you. Where's my little Sarah?" Sarah ran down the stairs, but stopped short when she saw Beatrice. Her smile faded. "Hi, Aunt Bea." "Hello, my love. How are you? You look different." "I'm fine." Beatrice observed the interaction between Sarah and Emily with hawk eyes. She noticed how Sarah instinctively moved closer to Emily, how she sought her hand. "Sarah, why don't you show me your new drawings?" Beatrice suggested. "Emily can prepare us tea." It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. While Emily prepared tea in the kitchen, she could hear fragments of the conversation between Beatrice and Sarah. "Do you like your new caregiver?" "Yes, Emily is fun. She makes cookies with me." "Oh, really? And what else does she do?" "We play, in the garden. And she tells me stories and you, Daddy. How is he with her?" Emily tensed, straining to hear. "Daddy smiles more," Sarah replied innocently. "Yesterday I saw him looking at Emily when she wasn't looking." Emily's heart raced. Beatrice was silent for a moment that felt eternal. "Interesting," she finally murmured. When Emily returned with the tea, the atmosphere had changed. Beatrice looked at her with a smile that boded no good. "Tell me, Emily, where are you from?" "New York." "What part?" "The Lower East Side." "Ah, and your family?" Emily felt the ground tremble beneath her feet. "I don't have family." "How sad. Are you an orphan then?" "Yes." "Which orphanage?" The question dropped like a bomb. Emily felt the bracelet in her pocket burn. St. Stephen's, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Beatrice raised an eyebrow. St. Stephen's? What a coincidence. Clara was there too. Emily's world stopped. Sarah looked at her, confused. Mommy was in an orphanage? Beatrice slowly stood up, not taking her eyes off Emily. Yes, my love. Your mom was at St. Stephen's until she was 18. She paused dramatically. I suppose you two must have known each other. Emily felt like she was drowning. The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together painfully. Clara, the orphanage, the bracelet, Sarah's blue eyes that looked so much like. No, she murmured. It can't be. What can't be, Emily? Beatrice approached like a predator. That you appeared in Daniel's life just when he was most vulnerable. That his daughter immediately accepted you as if she knew you, or that you are exactly the same age Clara's sister would have been if she hadn't died. What sister? Sarah looked between the two women, confused and scared. Clara had a younger sister at the orphanage, Beatrice explained, without taking her eyes off Emily. She died in a fire when she was 5, or so we thought. Emily stood up abruptly, knocking her cup to the floor. The porcelain shattered. I can't be. Are you sure? Beatrice smiled cruelly. Because Daniel told me you hired a private investigator. I suppose you already know the truth. It was a lie. Emily hadn't hired anyone. But Beatrice didn't know that. Aunt B, I don't understand. Sarah began to cry. Why are you shouting, Emily? Emily knelt beside Sarah, taking her hands. It's okay, little one. Adults sometimes argue, but it's not your fault. Are you going to leave like Mommy? Sarah's words broke her heart. Emily hugged her tight. No, honey, I'm not going to leave. We'll see about that, Beatrice murmured. Daniel has a right to know who is taking care of his daughter. That night, after putting Sarah to bed, Emily locked herself in her room and took out the bracelet. She studied it under the lamplight, looking for a mark, some detail that would confirm her suspicions. On the inside of the heart, barely visible, there was a small inscription. For C&E, Sisters Forever. SM. Sister Mary, Clara, and Emily. Sisters Forever. Emily put her hands to her mouth to stifle a sob. It was real. Clara was her sister. Her older sister who had protected her in the orphanage until she was adopted. Her sister who had promised to come back for her. Her sister who had married Daniel and had Sarah. Her sister who had died without knowing that Emily was still alive. The phone rang, startling her. It was Daniel. How's Sarah? Good. Sleeping. And you? Beatrice? Told me you had an interesting conversation. Emily closed her eyes. Of course Beatrice had called Daniel. Daniel, I'll be there in 2 hours. We need to talk. The line went dead. Emily went to the window and looked at the lights of London shining in the distance. Somewhere in that city, Daniel was coming towards her with questions she didn't know if she could answer. Because if she told him the truth, if she confessed that she was Clara's sister, would he hate her? Would he think she had come to manipulate him? That she had used Sarah to get closer to him? And worst of all, how was she going to explain that she had fallen in love with him without knowing who she really was? That every time he looked at her, every time he almost kissed her, she was betraying the memory of his dead sister. Emily curled up in bed, hugging the bracelet to her chest. Outside, it started to rain again, as if the sky was crying for all the truths that were about to come to light. And for the first time since she arrived at that house, Emily felt completely alone. What shocking truth do you think Emily is about to uncover about Daniel's actions during her absence? How will this revelation impact their fragile, newfound family? Share your predictions in the comments. The unveiling. Daniel entered the mansion like a silent storm. It was 11 o'clock at night, and the house was asleep. But Emily was waiting for him in the main living room, sitting on the edge of the sofa with her hands clasped in her lap. You didn't have to come back so soon, she murmured when she saw him appear in the doorway. Yes, I did. Daniel had loosened his tie during the flight from Boston. His hair was slightly disheveled, and there were dark shadows under his eyes. He looked tired, but also dangerous. Beatrice told me some very interesting things about you. Emily lifted her chin, trying to appear braver than she felt. Like what? Like you were in the same orphanage as Clara. Like you're exactly the age her little sister would have been. Daniel approached slowly. Like Sarah reacted to you in a way that makes no sense, unless she already knew you. She didn't know me, no. Daniel stopped in front of her. Then explain to me why my daughter, who hadn't uttered a word in 8 months, said mommy in her sleep last night. Emily's world reeled. Sarah had said mommy? It was impossible. That can't be true. I was reviewing the security footage when Beatrice called me. Daniel took out his phone. Do you want to see it? Emily shook her head, tears beginning to well up. Daniel, I didn't know. Didn't know what? That Clara was your sister? That Sarah is your niece? The words were like slaps. Emily stood up abruptly. I didn't plan any of this. No? Then explain how you just happened to appear when I was most vulnerable. Because I'm her aunt, Emily cried. Because her mother was my sister, and even though I didn't know it, she recognized me somehow. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel looked at her as if he couldn't process the information. Clara told me about you, he finally murmured. She told me she had a little sister who had died in an orphanage fire. I didn't die. I was transferred to another facility when I was 5 after the fire. I lost my memory for months. When I remembered Clara, it was too late. Emily wiped her tears. I spent years looking for her. Years! But by then she had changed her name. She had married you. Daniel ran his hands through his hair, trying to take it all in. Why didn't you tell me this when you arrived? Because I didn't know. It wasn't until I found the bracelet that I started to suspect. What bracelet? Emily took the silver bracelet from her pocket and extended it to him with a trembling hand. This. It was mine. Sister Agnes gave them to us when we were little. One for Clara, one for me. Daniel took the bracelet and read the inscription. His face hardened. Clara kept it her whole life. She told me it belonged to someone she loved very much. She was waiting for me. All those years. Emily's voice completely broke. Daniel watched her cry, a part of him wanting to comfort her, another furious at the lie. You have to leave. What? You have to leave this house now. Daniel, please. You can't stay. I can't look at you without seeing Clara. I can't touch you without feeling like I'm betraying her. I'm not Clara, I know, and that's exactly why you have to leave. They looked at each other, breathing heavily. Between them were years of pain, guilt, and a connection neither knew how to handle. I'm not leaving, Emily finally said. Sarah needs me. Sarah needs stability. And what do you need, Daniel? The question hit him like a punch, because he knew exactly what he needed. He needed her. I need you to leave, he lied. Emily approached him slowly. Daniel backed away, but she kept advancing until she cornered him against the wall. Look me in the eyes and tell me you feel nothing for me, Daniel. Tell me that when you look at me, you only see your dead wife's sister. Stop. Please, tell me that you haven't thought about me every night since I arrived. Daniel closed his eyes, clenching his fists. I can't. You can't tell me, or you can't feel it. When Daniel opened his eyes, the look he gave Emily was full of pain and desire in equal parts. I can't feel it. I can't desire you knowing who you are. Clara is dead, Daniel. I'm alive, and Sarah needs us both to be alive. It's not that simple. Why not? Daniel didn't answer, but his eyes said everything. Emily moved closer. Do you hate me, or do you desire me? She whispered. I hate you for making me feel this. His voice became hoarse. And I desire you so much it hurts to breathe. Emily raised a hand and touched his cheek. Daniel trembled, but didn't pull away. Then don't ask me to leave. This is wrong, Daniel murmured. I know. Clara was my wife. I know. And I can't stop loving you. The kiss that followed was desperate, guilty, full of months of accumulated tension. Daniel pushed her against the wall, as if he wanted to merge with her and erase everything that was wrong. Emily responded with the same intensity, as if it were the last time. When they finally separated, both were breathing heavily. Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "What are we going to do?" he whispered. "I don't know," Emily replied. "But I'm not leaving." Daniel closed his eyes, knowing he was lost. That, no matter how wrong it was, he couldn't let her go anymore. "Tomorrow, I'll talk to my lawyer," he murmured. "I want to see the orphanage documents." "Okay, and then we'll see what we do with this." Emily nodded, though both knew it was already too late. They had already crossed the line of no return. At that moment, it started to rain heavily against the windows, as if the sky was crying for all the truths that had just come to light. What do you think will be the biggest challenge for Daniel and Emily now that Sarah knows the truth? Will their renewed passion lead to a lasting reconciliation? Share your predictions in the comments. A father's fight. 3 weeks later, the news exploded in every newspaper in London. Daniel Blackwood loses temporary custody of daughter after sister-in-law's lawsuit. Emily read the headline while waiting in family court. Beside her, Daniel reviewed documents with his lawyer, his jaw tense as stone. "The orphanage documents confirm everything," the lawyer murmured. "Emily Reed, biological sister of Clara Hayes, separated in 1999 after the fire. Does that help us?" Daniel asked. "Depends. Beatrice is alleging negligence in background checks. She also suggests an inappropriate relationship between you two." Emily felt nauseous. For the past few weeks, they had been extremely careful, but the tension between them was palpable. "Where is Sarah now?" Emily asked. "At Beatrice's house, under temporary custody." Daniel's voice sounded broken. "I haven't seen her in 4 days." The courtroom door opened and Beatrice entered, impeccable in a black suit, followed by her lawyer. Her eyes immediately locked on Emily with a triumphant smile. "Look what we have here," she murmured. "The resurrected sister." "Ms. Hayes," Daniel greeted her coldly. "Daniel, I'm sorry we have to meet like this, but my duty is to protect Sarah. Clara would have wanted her daughter to be with real family, not with this." "Emily is family," Daniel retorted. "She's Clara's sister. A sister who supposedly died. A sister who appeared out of nowhere, and who now shares a house with you." Beatrice smiled maliciously. "The neighbors have been very observant." "Your Honors, the case is ready," an officer announced. The courtroom was cold and formal, and the judge studied the documents while Sarah sat next to a social worker, pale and confused. When Sarah's eyes met Emily's, the girl lit up. "Emily!" she cried, trying to get up. "Sarah, stay seated," Beatrice told her firmly. Sarah's expression darkened. For the past few days, she had constantly asked for Emily. "Mr. Blackwood," the judge began, "you hired Ms. Reed without verifying her background. Is that correct?" Daniel stood up. "That is correct, Your Honor, but the circumstances were exceptional. My daughter had stopped speaking after her mother's death. Ms. Reed was the first person who managed to get Sarah to communicate again. Didn't you find it suspicious that a stranger would have such an immediate connection?" "At first, yes, but Sarah needed that connection. For the first time in months, my daughter was smiling again." "When did you discover Ms. Reed's true identity?" 3 weeks ago. "And what was your reaction?" Daniel looked at Emily, then at Sarah. "At first, anger, confusion, but then relief. Relief, yes, Your Honor, because I finally understood why Sarah had reacted that way. She was her aunt, her family." Beatrice's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, my client is concerned about the nature of the relationship between Mr. Blackwood and Ms. Reed, considering they live in the same house. There is no evidence of any inappropriate relationship," Daniel's lawyer interrupted. "No?" Beatrice stood up. I have testimonies from neighbors and photographs." Emily's heart stopped. Beatrice took out an envelope and handed the photographs to the judge. Emily could see a blurry image of her and Daniel in the garden, very close. "This was taken last week," Beatrice continued. "Their body language suggests an intimacy that goes beyond the professional." Emily remembered that afternoon. Daniel had arrived stressed, and she had put a hand on his shoulder to comfort him. Nothing more. But in the photograph, it looked much more intimate. "Sarah," the judge said softly, "can you tell me how you feel about Emily?" Sarah looked at all the adults, then at Emily. "Emily takes care of me. She makes cookies with me. She reads me stories. And she tells me that Mommy loved her very much." "Do you want to stay with Emily and your daddy?" "Yes," Sarah replied without hesitation. "I want to go home." "And how do you feel about your Aunt Beatrice?" Sarah looked at Beatrice, then at the floor. "Aunt B is okay, but she doesn't know my favorite stories, and she doesn't know I like hot chocolate before bed, and she doesn't hug me like Emily." "Sarah, I can learn those things, but you're not Emily," Sarah simply said. The judge studied all the documents again. The silence was deafening. "It's a very complex situation," he murmured. "On the one hand, Ms. Reed clearly has a special connection with the minor. On the other hand, the circumstances raise questions." Daniel stood up abruptly. "Your Honor, what's wrong with two people who have lost the same woman comforting each other? Clara was my wife and Emily's sister. We both loved her. We are both raising her daughter." "Mr. Blackwood." "No, let me finish." Daniel approached the stand. "I lost my wife. My daughter lost her mother. And for 8 months we lived like ghosts, until Emily arrived. She didn't come to replace Clara. She came to honor her memory by taking care of Sarah, as Clara would have wanted." Daniel turned to Beatrice. "You knew Clara. You know she would have moved heaven and earth to find her sister. Using our closeness as an excuse to separate a child from her real family is exactly the opposite of what Clara would have wanted." Beatrice paled. For the first time, she looked insecure. "Your Honor," Daniel continued, "yes, I feel something. For Emily. Something I don't know how to handle. But that doesn't mean it's harmful to Sarah. It means there's finally love in this house again." The judge looked at Sarah, who had started to cry silently. "Sarah, are you okay?" "I want to go home with Daddy and Emily," she sobbed. "Please." Emily felt her heart break. She stood up without permission. "Your Honor, if my presence is the problem, I will leave. But please, don't punish Sarah for the adult's feelings." "Sit down, Ms. Reed," the judge said, but his tone wasn't harsh. He studied the papers once more. Then he looked at everyone in the room. "The well-being of the minor is my only priority," he murmured. "And it is evident that Sarah has thrived under the joint care of Mr. Blackwood and Ms. Reed." Beatrice tensed. "However, I also understand the concerns about the nature of the relationship between the caregivers." Emily's heart sank. "Therefore, my decision is, custody returns to Mr. Blackwood, on the condition that Ms. Reed remains as a caregiver under social supervision for 6 months. Monthly visits will be conducted." Emily felt she could breathe again. Daniel closed his eyes with relief. "Furthermore, I recommend that both Mr. Blackwood and Ms. Reed seek psychological counseling." Sarah stood up and ran to Emily and Daniel, hugging them both. "Can we go home now?" she whispered. Daniel looked at Emily over Sarah's head. His eyes were full of gratitude and something deeper. "Yes, Princess," he murmured. "We can go home." That night, after putting Sarah to bed, Daniel and Emily found themselves in the living room. The house felt different. "Thank you," Daniel said, "for being willing to leave for Sarah." "I wouldn't have really left," Emily admitted. "I know." They sat in silence at opposite ends of the sofa. "And now what?" Emily asked. Daniel looked at her. She had dark circles under her eyes from stress, but she was still beautiful. Now we do what the judge said. We seek help. We figure out how to make this work. Do you want it to work? Daniel got up and approached, kneeling in front of the sofa. Emily, these days without you and Sarah have been hell. I've realized something. What? That Clara wouldn't have wanted me to be alone forever, and she definitely wouldn't have wanted Sarah to grow up without love. Daniel took Emily's hands. You're not Clara, and that's okay, because I don't need Clara back. I need you. Your laugh, your warmth, the way you make Sarah happy. Emily felt tears in her eyes. Daniel, I know it's complicated, but I want to try. If you want to. Emily leaned in until their foreheads touched. I'm scared, she whispered. Me too, and if it doesn't work, and if it does? Emily closed her eyes. Okay, she murmured. Let's try. The kiss that followed was soft, tentative, full of promises. It wasn't the desperate passion from before, but something deeper, a decision, a commitment. When they separated, Daniel caressed Emily's cheek. You know what's the strangest thing? What? That I feel like Clara sent us to each other. Emily smiled through her tears. Maybe she did. Upstairs, Sarah heard the soft voices and smiled against her pillow. Her family was together again, and for the first time since her mom died, Sarah fell asleep without nightmares. What do you think will be the ultimate outcome for Daniel and Emily's relationship? Will their love story finally have its happily ever after, or will the past continue to haunt them? Share your predictions in the comments. A new beginning. Months later, the apartment in Brooklyn was small compared to the mansion, but it had something the previous house never had. It felt like a home. The walls were full of Sarah's drawings and photographs of the three of them together. Daniel had resigned as CEO 2 months ago, selling his shares. The decision had been unexpected for everyone, except for Emily. Don't you regret it? She had asked him one night. Regret giving up 60 hours a week of stress to have 60 hours with you and Sarah? Daniel had smiled. Never. He now ran a small consulting firm from home, working with startups. He earned less money, but he woke up without that suffocating feeling. Daddy? Emily? I'm home! Sarah's voice echoed through the apartment. At 6 years old, she had already grown 2 inches and lost 2 teeth. How was school, love? Emily came out of the kitchen. Great. Look what I made. Sarah unfolded a drawing where 3 smiling figures held hands under a rainbow. In the upper corner, there was a 4th figure with wings. It's our family, she explained. You, Daddy, me, and Mommy Clara, watching over us from heaven. Emily felt the familiar lump in her throat. During these months, they had talked a lot about Clara. Emily had told her stories from the orphanage. Daniel had shared memories of his marriage, and together they had created a small altar in Sarah's room. It's beautiful, little one, Daniel murmured, appearing with a coffee stain on his shirt. Shall we put it in the official gallery? The official gallery was the refrigerator door. Yes, in the place of honor. While Sarah taped her drawing, Daniel approached Emily and stole a kiss on her cheek. How was your day? Good. The kids at the daycare were quiet. Daniel laughed, and the sound filled the kitchen like music. It had been a slow transition, but during these months, they had learned to be a real family. Family therapy sessions had helped enormously. Dr. Elizabeth Evans had guided them through the complexities of their situation. Love is not a betrayal of the dead, she had told them. It is a tribute to the living. Do you know what day it is today? Sarah suddenly asked. Daniel and Emily looked at each other. It was October 15th. The day we moved here? No, Sarah laughed. It's the day you met, in the park, in the rain. Daniel and Emily looked at each other, surprised. They had been so busy that they hadn't realized it had been exactly 1 year. You're right, Emily murmured. How did you remember? Because I wrote it in my diary. I said, "Today I met my Aunt Emily," and Daddy smiled. For the first time, Daniel picked Sarah up in his arms, spinning her around. "And what do you propose we do to celebrate?" "Go to the park, the same one where we met." "But it's not raining," Emily pointed out. "It doesn't matter. We can pretend it's raining." An hour later, the three of them walked through Prospect Park towards the area where it all began. Sarah ran ahead, chasing pigeons. "Do you ever regret it?" Emily asked, as they walked. "Regret what?" "Everything. Hiring me, resigning, us." Daniel stopped and turned her towards him, framing her face. "Emily, a year ago I was a ghost. I had all the money in the world, a huge house, a prestigious job, and I felt completely empty." Sarah wasn't speaking. I wasn't sleeping. He caressed her cheeks. "Now I live in a 2-bedroom apartment. I work from the kitchen table, and I'm happier than I ever thought possible. How could I regret it? Because it's complicated. Because people look at us strangely." "Let them look!" Daniel moved closer. "You saved me, Emily. You saved me, and you saved Sarah." At that moment, as if the universe had been waiting, it began to drizzle. Fine drops that gradually increased. "Rain!" Sarah shouted from the swings. "Real rain!" Emily lifted her face to the sky, feeling the fresh drops. It was the same feeling she had had a year ago. "Do you know what you told me the first time we met?" Daniel murmured. "That raindrops were messages from the sky. And what do you think it's telling us today?" Emily closed her eyes, feeling the rain intensify. Sarah ran towards them, getting soaked and laughing. "I think it's telling us that some endings are actually beginnings," Emily whispered. Daniel then kissed her under the increasingly heavy rain, with Sarah hugging them and laughing. It was a different kiss from all the previous ones. It had no desperation or guilt. It was a kiss of certainty, of future, of family. When they separated, all three were completely soaked. "You know what?" Daniel said, wiping his eyes. "I never believed in love at first sight." "And now?" Emily asked. "Now I believe there's something better than love at first sight." "What?" Daniel looked at Sarah, who was dancing in the rain, then at Emily. "The love that grows slowly, that survives storms, that is built day by day until it becomes unbreakable." "That sounds much better," Emily admitted. "Let's go home," Sarah shouted. "I want hot chocolate, and for you to tell me how you fell in love." Daniel and Emily looked at each other and burst out laughing. Sarah had asked that question approximately 50 times in the last few months. "Ready for another version of our story?" Daniel asked, extending his hand to Sarah. "Yes, but this time tell me the part where Daddy got nervous." "That didn't happen," Daniel protested. "Yes, it did. Emily told me." Emily shrugged innocently, while Daniel looked at her with feigned indignation. They walked home in the rain, all three soaked, laughing and arguing about which parts of their story were true. And as they walked away from the park where it all began, a figure watched from a distance. It was Sister Mary, who had come to London for a conference. She had been looking for her 2 girls from the orphanage for decades, and seeing Emily happy filled her heart with peace. "Thank you, Clara," she murmured to the wind. "You took care of your sister even after you left." "I never believed in love," Emily murmured against Daniel's lips that night back home. "Until I saw you in my arms," he replied, completing the phrase that had become their promise. And outside, the rain continued to fall softly, like a blessing on a family that had learned that true love was not just about finding each other, but choosing each other every day. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave your comments below. What was your favorite part of this chapter? Are you Team Daniel or Team Emily? Let me know.